Race has been the topic over the last couple of weeks, but if we're going to do this right, if we're going to have an honest discussion among people who care about the problems inside the black community, we have to be dealing with honest brokers. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the so-called civil rights community are frauds, outright hucksters. Two of the worst, Al Sharpton, Michael Eric Dyson. Their goal, demonize white people, especially conservatives like Bill O'Reilly, so they don't have to deal with the real problems that continue to plague the black community. Making an older, conservative white guy like O'Reilly a boogeyman is easy for these hustlers. Confronting the real problems, real threats inside the minority community, no. High murder rates? How about that? High dropout rates? Family breakdown? I bet you think I'm exaggerating. Well, listen to Michael Eric Dyson.
Why is it that when we say we want to have a conversation on race, you want to have a conversation on blackness? You don't want to have a conversation on race. You don't want to have a conversation on white privilege, unconscious bias. You don't want to talk about the collective world we've made as black, brown, red, yellow, and white people. You want to lecture black people. So, Mr. O'Reilly, I'd love to have that conversation about protecting yourself behind white picket fences and Fox News and having digital courage. Come in the streets where you went to Sylvia and you were surprised that black people don't throw bananas at each other or swing from trees.
Can you believe that? This is unbelievable on so many levels, but let me just start by saying this. He's making the charge, basically, that O'Reilly is portraying black people as animals, and of course, this never happened. This is not true. O'Reilly, in fact, in the whole episode at Sylvia's, which O'Reilly and I talked about on the radio, was going on about defeating racial stereotypes in this society. But that's not what Michael Eric Dyson wants to do here. He wants to hold up somehow that Bill O'Reilly is a racist and the target of the conversation, and therefore we should be about somehow going after Bill O'Reilly. Well, who does that help? Let's think about that for a second. If this is a real conversation about helping people, if you truly love people and want to help those in need, how does it help to go after conservatives, O'Reilly, white people, rich people? Let's go to the people who need help and give them help. But that's not what Michael Eric Dyson's doing. Oh, no. When you start talking about, well, are you doing anything to help the schools in the inner city? No. What about the carnage on black streets with kids shooting each other? No. What about, any of the issues attached to family breakdown, 70% of children born out of wedlock? What about that? Oh, no. So what we're doing here is a huge distraction. Yes, there's legitimate rage in the black community over the Zimmerman verdict, but the idea that we have to use the power that exists in this country to help people who are in need in the black community, that is an ongoing and longer story, and you can't pull away from that by making Bill O'Reilly into your target and somehow beating him up. That's craziness. Dana, when you see this kind of politicization of something, I apologize if I get emotional about it, but it is so important that we reach out to people in need and not simply play this game, the political game. So I'm talking to you here, someone who knows politics, who knows communication. What is going on? Why does Dyson do that?
Oh, first of all, can I congratulate you on what was maybe one of the best opens of the 5 ever, and let people know that he wasn't reading that. Juan said all of that from the heart, and it was impressive and refreshing in particular. I did think about earlier today how, isn't it amazing how 2 weeks after, is it 3 weeks now, after the Trayvon Martin trial ended, that this story, you haven't heard about Trayvon Martin or any other young black kid ever since. The only people you've heard talk about are Al Sharpton, Bill O'Reilly, this Dyson guy, and a few others. It's amazing how an Al Sharpton is able to turn the attention to himself. I don't know of any single plan that they've put forward. I admire Nancy Pelosi today. She decided to have one of the hearings or like a town hall thing to use this as an opportunity to then do something. I would ask you, Juan, what is the most important thing that we could do if we set aside the ridiculousness of that comment? If we do care about people, and I do, and people at this table do, what do you think is the most important thing that we could do to address the problem? What's the root cause?
For me, it's education. I grew up as a poor kid, and if it wasn't for education, Dana, I wouldn't be anywhere. So, in other words, I had a tiger mom, and a tiger mom who was a black tiger mom, who said, you're going to get good grades, you're going to stay in school, you're going to work, and not only that, you're going to achieve. It's not just hanging in there, you're going to achieve. So to me, if we are serious about this, we go about taking on the unions, going at school reform, going at charter school, going at vouchers. That's why people say, well, they provide a lot of jobs, but you know what? Unless you're educating kids, unless you love the kids, you're not doing anything. You're not helping anybody. You understand what I'm saying, or you think I'm a nut?
I know. You and I have talked about this a lot. And I would ask you, Juan, do you think that Al Sharpton actually represents the black community? Because I don't think that he does. And you and I have talked about this. You've written about this in your book enough. He represents a minority of the black community now. And I don't think he does them a disservice, as you point out so passionately. Instead of encouraging them to focus on positive messages like studying and finding a job and working hard and being a good dad or a good mom, he is empowering them to sit in their house and be angry at Bill O'Reilly.
Or
How
angry at America, angry at America, angry at history. Yeah, I mean, it does. What does it say
for
to the kid?
anyone?
It doesn't say that you can make it in America, But he did the same thing, by the way. He did the same thing when Bill Cosby, a black man with a lot of credibility, said the very same thing. So it's not just O'Reilly. So Bill Cosby says the same thing. In that case, he says, oh, it's the black middle class looking down their nose out of shame at the black poor. They don't like the fact that white people see black poor people behaving in this dysfunctional way.
But Juan, do they represent the black community, though? Honestly, do they represent the views of the black community?
I think Sharpton plays a role because he calls attention when there's a problem. But no, I don't know who he... Remember, he didn't get any votes when he ran for president, when he ran for mayor. Let's look at Sharpton. Here's Sharpton.
50 years from the March on Washington, and there are serious issues that need attention on voting rights, on equal justice, on civil rights. But Mr. O'Reilly has the problems in the African-American community figured out. We have a long history in this country of some people exploiting differences between us for their own advantage. It's a cynical appeal to the worst instincts in our great country.
Hand him a mirror.
Well, I was going to say, who do you think? I mean, this is what I'm talking about. It's an industry, so it's a grievance industry, and I think it is very profitable for some people. But again, to come back to the help theme, David, is it helping Al Sharpton or is it helping the people who need the help?
Look, add the term profiteers to these guys because it's helping them. I've debated Michael Eric Dyson, and if you want to look at a political race huckster love child, it's what Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton created in Michael Eric Dyson. He doesn't have an ethnic issue he won't make about race. He's dishonest. He talks about his degrees. So who cares? Like Andrea asked the question for Sharpton, these guys don't represent the black community. We're not a monolithic community. This country's all communities under one. But they need to separate us. If they separate us into groups and amalgamate us for their own power and their own control, this is what Obama did. This is what Sharpton, Jackson, Dyson, insert name here. It's profiteering. Here's what they did. They had 100 rallies in 100 cities. They didn't have 100 community meetings between neighborhoods, between neighborhood watches, and educate them on how to interact with each other. Why? Because they don't give a CRAP about any solution because they need to keep the argument going. They're having the 64 argument. It's 2013. It doesn't benefit them, and they're irrelevant if they don't keep us in that argument. Look at Detroit. You talk about education, Juan. All right, 47% illiteracy rate, functionally illiterate people in Detroit.
It's just breakdown. It's just, Greg, this reminds me, there was this whole story about, Sharpton saying, Dyson saying about Bill Cosby, when Bill Cosby said, why do the black parents want to spend all this money on sneakers? Put that money into, hooked on phonics or reading or something, And he said, oh, you know what? Why do you hold them to a different standard than middle-class people who spend all that money on sneakers? And I thought, is that crazy? Is he joking?
Well, accusations of racism is the laziest and the last resort of an intellectual lightweight. Dyson has gotten away not from just racial hysteria to get attention and create false expertise, but it's made him into an intellectual when he's not. He's not an intellectual. That is the biggest fraud of all. By the way, I want to put out, whites have been creating hucksters for years, so I forgive. I mean, you got
he stole hucksters.
Yeah. I mean, they haven't invented it, but think about what happened if blacks got help. What would happen to the Dysons and the Sharptons of the world? They would be out of a job. If you took race out of the MSNBC lineup, all they would be doing is lock up marathons because that's all they'd have left. There is nothing, when you take that away, it's all gone. But I think a lot of this comes back, we talk about education, but there's a piece of this education that is destructive. A lot of this race mongering comes from campuses. It's the African American studies. It's the even gender studies. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of hate that if you took that out, it would not exist anymore. The fact is, the same shallow pursuits that plague black life also plague white life. We have the same idiotic pursuits. We have a fast-paced culture filled with gadgets but no soul. The problem is it hurts them more because we got a head start. Quayle was right. When Quayle talked about Murphy Brown and he says, you have a rich white lady having a kid, a single kid, that's great for her but lousy for the rest of us. Yep. The chickens have come home to roost, and Dan Quayle was right. And I hate saying that. Well, maybe I don't hate it, but pop culture enforces ideas that destructive behaviors are cool, and because they are not damaging to the enforcers of the cool, it's okay.
Well, that's the thing. You know, you stop and think about this. A third of the white children now, just about a third, born out of wedlock, half of the Hispanic kids. So we can focus on the blacks. But this is not just about the black community. But instead, what you get is people encouraging this sense of victimization.
Yeah.
You can't make it. The country's bad. So you hate on the white people. You hate on O'Reilly. You hate on the immigrants.
They love to do it to women, too.
You hate on the black middle class.
The left loves to do it to women, too, to keep themselves relevant. And for Michael Eric Dyson to talk about courage when he stepped out of, what, a faculty lounge onto an MSNBC set? That's not exactly what I call portrait in courage. Greg, you brought up Lockup. Instead of running Lockup
their highest rated
over and over and over, that actually highlights the problem in this country, not just blacks but whites, the breakdown of the family, the breakdown of society. Why not have a special on empowering blacks and bring in somebody like you, David, or somebody like you, Juan?
Well, you know what?
Because it breaks their narrative. I mean, if you go in and tell them that this is an economic issue, it's an education issue, it's family or blended family units, whether it's mom and dad or mom and grandparents or whatever it is, which, by the way, those are the things that help in any community, the blended families, the good environment. If you break that narrative, this is why I used the term Bill Cosby.
My point is that the media rides shotgun on this as well.
Yeah, so
they're hucksters.
But I have to say, I don't know who represents the African American community. I couldn't even tell you who represents the white community. I don't look at it that way.
What about the American
However,
community?
I do think that President Obama's invitation to Al Sharpton to the White House is a signal and a symbol that says they don't really care what we have to say here on the 5 or on Fox News at large. I mean, the invitation was extended to Al Sharpton, to the fraudster, to the huckster, not to O'Reilly. Imagine if President Obama had done something, this would have been amazing. Invited Sharpton and O'Reilly together. The beer summit at the White House. Like, you know what? These two people, they're out there talking about it. Let's bring them together, force them to the White House.
But you know what?
And that could have been an amazing moment. But instead, it was a divisive one by inviting Sharpton.
But the point is, Sharpton should not be. Sharpton is in the White House more than Obama is lately. The fact is, it's time to get rid of the old and bring in the new. There are people that are actually speaking truth. I bring up Lupe Fiasco because after the Trayvon Martin trial, he was speaking uncomfortable truths about the nature of black-on-black crime. He is the new.
Well,
Al Sharpton's the old.
Look at this is what happens though when somebody brings up the truth. Here's Don Lemon.
Yeah.
I gave advice to African Americans about suggestions about how you might.
Because you're the anchor, yes.
Yeah. One was pull up your pants, the sagging pants thing. I said stop dropping the N-word like you're saying and, the, or he so much. I said respect where you live and finish school and also be an involved parent if you either plan for a kid or stop having a kid on wedlock. That's advice my mother gave me in kindergarten.
Now that constitutes, according to the critics, airing dirty laundry. That's the charge against O'Reilly. It's the charge against Bill Cosby. How is that airing dirty laundry? To me, that's helping people. Because you know those things that Don Lemon said? It's not just rhetoric. Statistically, if you do those things, there's almost no chance you live in poverty in America. I wrote about this in Enough.
Yes, you did. And it goes for whites,
Let me say, for everybody watching, pay attention to this. Go out in life looking like a prospect, not a suspect. Treat yourself with respect. Realize that you have to operate in this environment. It's an American problem. If you do it and handle it from that point of view, I did it. Others have done it. it's not a monolithic block. You can get ahead of the race profiteers, whatever
Look
you
what
want to
Greg's
call
been
them.
able to do with his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. He turned it
If
around.
Greg
I
can
did.
make it.
Yeah, you should have seen what I looked like 5 years ago. My pants were down to
You were
my.
a mess. Your
Did he wear
ankles.
pink sweaters
Yes.
back then?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pick
yeah.
on
All
me.
right. Well, I love
white
his
man.
underwear.